Welcome to Michael Potts F1, every moment from every Grand Prix. We've just completed 3 days of winter testing here in Bahrain. That's 24 hours of track time. And I spent most of that time out on track looking at the cars, seeing what's new and seeing how they perform. In this video, I'm going to have a look over what I saw over the past 3 days. The fastest car in testing, surprisingly, was Carlos Sainz in a Williams. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be the fastest car when you go to Melbourne. The true pace setters, in my opinion, are the McLarens. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri looked very, very fast, specifically in their long runs. On day 2, during a race simulation, Norris looked outstanding. He looked visibly faster than his nearest rivals in McLaren and Ferrari. And you do get the feeling that the team knows that they're the favourites because they kept downplaying their results, as only a favourite would. The next 2 teams, for me, were Ferrari and Mercedes, and it was very hard to tell the difference between these two. It is possible that the conditions really just favoured the Mercedes. It was very cold. It was closer to what we had in Las Vegas than what we'll have for most of the season. Last year, the Mercedes was a car that really did well in cold conditions. The 4th fastest team appears to be Red Bull. Max did manage to get a very good time on day 3, but it's the team with the least amount of running. And they did spend an awful lot of time in the garage fixing mechanical issues. On Friday, I was trying to get hit-on shots of all the teams, and it took over an hour for the Red Bull to appear from their garage. This is not a good sign going into the first race. And despite Max putting in a very, very good time on day 3, I also captured these shots of him spinning in turn 1 in the same session. So there's a lot for Red Bull to work on. Alpine and Williams seem to be contesting for best of the rest. Alpine put in some very, very strong lap times, and Williams looked great over the full 3 days of testing. Aston Martin appears to have dropped behind these 3, but they are another team which we might not have seen their full potential. Quite often when I was trying to do shots of all 10 cars, it was often the Aston that I was waiting for. Lance Stroll was ill on day 3, so he didn't complete his full run cycle. Teammate Fernando Alonso had to step in and complete the test plan. It's a bit difficult to place Haas because they weren't doing the same test program as all the other teams. They were focusing on their long run pace. So quite often their drivers were somewhere near the bottom of the timesheets. This is going to be a very interesting team to watch when it comes to Australia. It's really hard to say whether they're faster or slower than VCARB. It does look like Sauber is still the slowest team on the grid, but they have closed the gap a bit. The car did look like it was the most difficult to drive. But overall, all the teams had a very good test, and the gaps between them are a lot smaller than they were this time last year. McLaren should be the happiest team after the 3 days of testing. They're in a much stronger position than they were 12 months ago, and this should give them an opportunity to challenge Red Bull for both titles. But more importantly than who was topping the timesheets, which team was looking the best? In my opinion, it came down to 2, VCARB and Alpine. VCARB was a standout at F1 75 Live in London, but it was the Alpine that looked best on track, in my opinion. It looks brilliant from the front, the beautiful pink stands out, and then from the side with that really strong BWT logo, it looks brilliant. I loved every moment of photographing this car. It's bright, it's bold, and for the first time, I think, Alpine have managed to get the 2 colors to work together perfectly. Red Bull's traditional livery still looks very strong, as did the Mercedes. The red Ineos logos are no longer on the car, and I think that makes the car look a lot better. Having 3 main colors works perfectly here. There is a boldness about the Haas, which I really like, and with a strong graphical logo on the side pods, it looks great. It's just not that good from the front. McLaren is next on my list, and I don't think that this car is as strong as last year's. It's so frustrating because they have chrome as a sponsor, and they've produced these beautiful one-off chrome liveries that look amazing, and instead they choose to run black, and the black and papaya just don't blend that well in my opinion. Ferrari have gone a touch darker, which does look very, very good, but they have also loaded the car with sponsors, specifically HP, and for me the white stripe over the engine color clashes. It just makes the whole car too busy and quite cluttered. Next is Aston Martin in their classic British racing green. It's a beautiful livery, it's very sophisticated, absolutely lovely, but it's a bit boring, and I feel the car is quite dark. Another dark car is the Williams, and under lights I really struggle to tell the difference between the Aston and the Williams. Williams are another team that have a great potential to do a stunning livery with Gulf oil, but they continue with this nondescript blue that doesn't really mean anything. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a wasted opportunity in my books. And bringing up the rear, as they do with the lap times, is probably the least attractive. the stake kick salver. Last year's car was bright and bold and it looked brilliant. This year they've gone for a matte green, only on the front half of the car, and it really does not work. In the F175 launch, it appeared that there was a transition between the green and the black that didn't appear to be there on the track car, and they just haven't used the two colors that effectively. Whereas last year it was one of my favorite cars. Now, we've also had a lot of driver changes. Obviously, the headline story is Lewis and Ferrari. This is such a big story in Formula One, and it was brilliant to see him arriving in red on day one of testing. He looks a lot happier, a lot more relaxed in the team, and his longtime trainer, Angela Cullen, has made her return. It was brilliant seeing her around the paddock, and it does feel like the old gang is back together. Carlos Sainz appears to be very comfortable after his move to Williams. He did record the fastest time of the entire test, and it looks like he's going to be in a car that's going to be a regular point scorer. Esteban also looked a lot more comfortable at Haas, and the Hulk has finally found a team where he can sport his natural colours, green. I just don't think his lap times are going to be that incredible. But we do have 6 rookies, the most we've had in a Formula One season for years, and all 6 of them hit the ground running. I am absolutely amazed by all 6 of these young kids. They've all come into Formula One, one of the most high-pressured sporting arenas, where they're under incredible scrutiny, and they've all performed fabulously so far. None of them have looked out of their depth. They all look like they've been here for years. There's an infectious confidence around these young kids, and it's going to be wonderful for us to discover them as the year progresses. Antonelli had a particularly strong test with some outstanding times at Mercedes. His father was in the pits quite a lot, looking on to see how his son was performing. Jack Dern laughed and smiled his way through the test, also putting in some great times over in Alpine. Liam Lawson produced a confident display at Red Bull, even though he wasn't given access to the new front wing on Friday. Isaac Hadjar, Ollie Behrman, and Gabriel Bortoletto all did very, very good jobs for their respective teams. It's great to have so much young blood coming through Formula One at the moment. The 3 fastest drivers over the course of the weekend were Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, and Charles Leclerc. The 3 slowest were Gabriel Bortoletto, Nico Hülkenberg, and Ollie Behrman. Mercedes clocked the most laps, 458, while Red Bull did the least amount of running with only 304 laps. Esteban Ocon was the busiest driver. He managed 260 laps of the Sakir circuit. Lance Stroll, due to his illness, only put in 133. A couple of things interesting about this test were the fact that it was so cold. I was out on the track with a jumper, a gilet, and a jacket, beanie. It was surprisingly cold for Bahrain. It also rained a lot. It rained so much that most of the teams opted to stay in their garages for a large chunk of day 2. Only 2 teams brought intermediate tyres, and only Haas was brave enough to venture out on them. We did have 3 stoppages, and none of them for any cars breaking down. Now, this is something that's really, very unusual. I remember back in the olden days, say 2016, 2017, where you'd go to winter testing and there would be a red flag every few minutes. The flatbed would have to come out and retrieve some stricken car from the side of the track. This year, not a single car stopped on track. I'm guessing that's probably a first for Formula One testing history. We did have 3 stoppages, one for a power failure, one for a shattered pane of glass caused by one of the Haas's flicking up a stone and shattering a window. And the third was by one of the media buses attempting to venture out on track. Now, this nearly happened to me while I was in one of these transports. Luckily, the passenger managed to correct the driver and we stayed off the circuit. But it is quite tricky at Sakir because they have multiple layouts to the tracks. And in some parts, it's hard to tell if you're on the live track or just a different part of the unused configuration. One of the more interesting moments was shooting the F1 driver's photo. This was quite cool to see how the different drivers interacted with each other, and also watching the Formula One photography team try to herd these 20 cats into position. Lando Norris and Max Verstappen appeared together in a press conference, and all the bitterness of last year appears to be completely gone. Both drivers were saying how much they enjoyed each other's company, and it really looks like their friendship is back on track. Let's see if this will last to the end of the race in Australia. So there we have it. 3 days of testing. All the teams looked very, very good. The gaps between each of them appear to be smaller than the end of last year. It looks like we've got the ingredients of a cracking year ahead of us. So do keep watching for more Formula One content. Next stop is Australia. So until then, goodbye.